Hello and welcome. Tonight we're stepping into a time where being a queen meant wearing 10 pounds of brocade while silently enduring political chess matches where you were often the piece, not the player. Welcome to medieval royalty, where your crown is heavy, your smile is rehearsed. And yes, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I love knowing who's on the other side of this journey. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're 13, maybe 14, and someone just told you you're getting married. You're a noble girl, maybe a princess, maybe the daughter of a minor king, and you're about to become a medieval queen. Romantic, right? No. This isn't love, it's politics through and through. Your future husband is chosen for what he can offer your father. Land, troops, a treaty, or maybe it's just an end to a blood feud that's been going on longer than you've been alive. Your opinion isn't just not required, it's not even considered. If you protest too much, you risk dishonouring your family, and you know how that ends. Spoiler, not well. You're packed off from your home with a procession of ox-drawn carts, dowry chests, and worried ladies-in-waiting who've been assigned to babysit you until the grave. Or worse, until your new court decides to swap them out for spies. Maybe you've met the king once, maybe not. Doesn't matter. You'll meet him again on your wedding day, under a canopy of incense and chanting monks in front of a crowd of strangers who can't wait to see if you cry. And you probably will, because this man isn't some dashing fairy tale prince. He's 35, grizzled from wars, maybe still married to someone else who's been conveniently locked in a convent. Or worse. Or he's a boy your age with just as little power and a court full of venomous old nobles using you both like dolls in a shadow play. Historically, this wasn't rare. Eleanor of Aquitaine was married to Louis VII of France at 15. She became Queen of France basically overnight. Her job, be beautiful, obedient, and give France an heir, in that exact order. Not that she obeyed any of it, by the way, but we'll get to her legendary rebellion later. Right now, your life is all about silks, sapphires, and suffocating responsibility. And the wedding? Let's not sugarcoat it. You walk down the nave in a gown that weighs more than your horse, embroidered with gold thread and lined in squirrel fur. Sounds luxurious until you realize medieval laundry was, inconsistent. You may look radiant, but you smell like beeswax, old lavender, and stress sweat. Everyone's watching. Everyone! The bishop, your future in-laws, the servants pressed against the back walls trying to catch a glimpse of the spectacle. After the vows and rings, maybe a crown if they're feeling generous. You're escorted to a room where, depending on how invasive the customs are, your first night with your husband might be witnessed. No, not metaphorically. There's an entire tradition in some courts of having noble witnesses observe the newlyweds being put to bed, and even a sheet check the next morning to prove the marriage was consummated. Sleep well. The weirdest part? Your family likely trained you for this moment. You were raised in a chamber near the women's quarters, taught to read just enough to recite psalms, trained in needlework and decorum. But no one told you how terrifying it would be to kneel beside a man who can literally sentence people to death and call him your beloved lord. You might not speak his language. You probably don't know what kind of ruler he is. And you're expected to share his bed, smile like it's an honor, and get to work on making babies immediately. The power imbalance is staggering. But here's the twist. Queens weren't always powerless. In fact, many wielded incredible soft power through influence, alliances, and religious networks. But in the beginning, as a teenager dropped into a foreign court with different food, strange customs, and possibly even hostile nobility, you're more decorative than decisive. And yet, there's something surreal about it too. You're handed a crown, draped in cloaks worth more than a farm, and referred to as Her Grace by people who a week ago didn't know you existed. Your name changes, your coat of arms is redrawn, your past absorbed into your husband's world. This isn't just a marriage, it's a rebranding. You're not a daughter anymore, you're property, carefully placed atop the chessboard of European dynasties. Sometimes you're lucky, maybe your husband is kind, maybe the court respects you, maybe you learn to speak the language, make allies, and even carve out a space of your own. But don't get too comfortable. Your womb is now a matter of state. Your first duty is to have a male heir, preferably yesterday. Everything else is just window dressing. One fringe fact: in some royal weddings, the bride was literally carried to bed in a ritual known as the bedding ceremony, complete with songs, jokes, and awkward nudging from older relatives. The entire court treated it like the grand finale of a banquet. Imagine that as a teenager. Scholars still debate whether queens were pawns or players in this system. Some insist they were nothing more than vessels for heirs and peace treaties. Others argue that, despite restrictions, they often held real sway, especially if they managed to outlive their husbands or raise powerful sons. But tonight, you're just a young queen sitting on the edge of an unfamiliar bed, staring at tapestries you don't recognize, trying not to cry. And guess what? It only gets more complicated from here. The next morning, sunlight pours through stained glass windows you don't recognize, casting jewel-toned shadows across a stone floor that's colder than your nerves. You're awake far too early, muscles aching from the stiff ceremonial bedding, and already the court is bustling with whispered gossip and clipped footsteps. Why? Because today, your dowry becomes official. And let's be honest, no one in this castle cares more about you than they do about what you're worth. The dowry isn't just a polite thank you for taking you off your father's hands. It's a carefully calculated package of wealth, land, titles, and sometimes entire cities. You are a geopolitical transaction in pearls and velvet. It's possible your dowry was discussed for years before you even hit puberty. And now, with the marriage complete in the most awkward sense, the accounts are due. Clerks in itchy robes hunch over parchment, squabbling over exactly how many cows or manors equate to your hand in marriage. Some royal dowries were absolutely bonkers. Margaret of Denmark, for instance, brought the entire Orkney and Shetland Islands as part of hers. Imagine being so valuable that whole chunks of the North Sea came with your wedding vows. Meanwhile, in France or England, the dowry could include jewellery, spices, bolts of cloth, and thousands of gold coins. An actual line item might be 12 gowns embroidered with peacock feathers. And this stuff wasn't symbolic, it mattered. If the dowry fell short or was delayed, it could spark a war. Yep, a war over your missing embroidery thread. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Your value is now locked into this transaction. If your dowry was large and paid on time, congratulations, you're a prized political asset. If your father shortchanged your husband or reneged on promises, you're officially the most expensive disappointment in court. No pressure. But it gets trickier. The dowry isn't just a one-way street. There's also something called a dower, which is what your husband promises you in return, sort of a just-in-case he dies horribly in battle fund. It usually includes lands or income-producing properties that you'll inherit if you outlive him. Of course, whether you'll actually get those lands, well, that depends on your husband's mood, your popularity, and how many scheming in-laws want those assets for themselves. There's a fringe historical tidbit here that's kind of hilarious in a grim way. Some dowries were detailed down to the number of undergarments included. Like your father might have sent a full accounting of your trousseau, including how many linen shifts you brought, and whether they were laced with gold thread. Some of these inventories have survived, and yes, they are weirdly specific. It's like reading a medieval fashion hall on parchment. The moment this transactional dance is complete, you officially belong to your husband's household. Your loyalties shift instantly, whether your heart has or not. And here's where it gets wildly awkward. Sometimes your father and husband hate each other, like deeply, but that doesn't matter anymore. You have to play nice, stay neutral, and most importantly, produce heirs. That's the only part of the deal that can't be written on parchment, so everyone's watching, waiting to see if you start showing signs of pregnancy. Fast. Oh, and don't expect privacy. Courtiers love to speculate. There's even a term for the flurry of surveillance queens faced after their weddings, the queen's bloom. Everyone wants to know when you'll bloom into motherhood. If you sneeze at breakfast or skip a wine goblet, whispers swirl like storm clouds. Some queens even faked early pregnancies to buy themselves time. Others miscarried in secret just to avoid court humiliation. You might try to focus on something less overwhelming, like settling into your new chambers. But even that's fraught. Your rooms are richly decorated, yes. Gilded wall panels, carved bedposts, rugs imported from Byzantium. But you're not alone in them, ever. Your ladies-in-waiting sleep nearby, servants shuffle in and out without knocking, and everything you say can and will be repeated. Still, you try to take control of what you can. Maybe you ask for your favourite psalter to be placed by your bedside. Maybe you commission a tapestry depicting your family crest to remind everyone, including yourself, where you came from. Little acts of self-assertion can go a long way, but you learn quickly. Don't overdo it. Being too proud is risky, especially if you're a foreign queen. People want you to be dignified, not defiant. Here's a scholarly debate that never quite gets settled. Were dowries empowering or dehumanizing? Some historians argue that because the dowry often came with land rights and income, it gave queens leverage within the royal household. Others counter that the whole system reduced women to literal price tags. You might find truth in both views. After all, you've got land and jewels, but also about as much autonomy as a decorative tablecloth. And then, of course, there's the awkward reality that you might be used again. If this marriage fails, say your husband dies suddenly or the alliance falls apart, you can be shipped off and married again, sometimes to someone even older or with fewer teeth. Your dowry might be renegotiated like a used goods exchange. The only thing more unstable than a political marriage is a second political marriage. Yay, but for now, you smile, sit upright at feasts, and pretend the sausages and honeyed almonds make it all feel normal. You clasp your goblet with elegant fingers and laugh politely at jokes you barely understand. Every gesture is watched, every misstep judged, every moment documented, sometimes literally in court records or chroniclers' scrolls, because you're no longer a person. You're a symbol, a treaty, a gilded link between two unstable kingdoms, and as exhausting as all that is, it's just the beginning. The first time you see the castle that's now your home, you expect something majestic. Maybe soaring towers, lush gardens, polished stone glowing in the afternoon light. What you get instead is something out of a chilly dream. Cold walls, grey skies, the air thick with damp moss and suspicion. The castle isn't built for comfort, it's built to withstand sieges, and now you live here. Congratulations, the arrival at court is theatre, make no mistake. The entire court turns out to greet you, though no one smiles too widely. Banners fly, trumpets blare, and children are scrubbed within an inch of their lives, just to stand in a muddy courtyard waving sprigs of rosemary. You ride in, stiff in the saddle, posture perfect. Your gown probably weighs 30 pounds, and underneath you're bracing against saddle sores and a cold wind that cuts through your silk-lined sleeves like a knife. But you can't flinch. Queens don't flinch. At the castle gates, your husband, or future husband, depending on how drawn out the wedding festivities are, greets you with ceremonial gestures, a kiss on the cheek, a quick touch of the hand if he's bold. Maybe he lifts your veil in front of the crowd, but you're already scanning the faces behind him. That's your real concern. Who's watching you with narrowed eyes? Who's smiling a little too much? Because the moment you cross that threshold, you're not just a guest. You're an intruder in someone else's world. The court is a hive of activity. Men in embroidered tunics bow stiffly. Women in heavy wimples exchange glances, and servants skitter like mice behind the scenes. You're introduced with all the usual pomp. Her Royal Grace, Queen of such and such, Lady of this and that. It takes a full 2 minutes just to say your title, but every word reminds everyone exactly what price you fetched. That title is sewn into your identity now, whether you like it or not. Inside, the place smells like burning tallow, wet stone, and whatever the kitchen is stewing for tonight's feast, which could be anything from spiced rabbit to eel pie. The walls are lined with tapestries that look warm but don't really help against the draught. Your rooms, what they call the Queen's apartments, are secluded enough to keep you from the general rabble, but not so private that gossip can't sneak in through the floorboards. And here's the kicker. You don't know anyone. Not really? Maybe your new mother-in-law, if she's still alive and hasn't been packed off to a nunnery. Maybe your ladies-in-waiting, if your father managed to send a few you trust. But most of the people around you? Strangers. Ambitious, gossipy, power-sniffing strangers. And you're a teenage queen with no allies, no experience, and no idea which fork to use for salted trout. a real-life example of this cold welcome. Anne of Bohemia, when she arrived in England to marry King Richard II, people openly mocked her dowry, calling it worthless. She didn't even speak English. She was thrust into a world where her new subjects expected miracles and instant charm, and she delivered neither, at least not at first. It took years for her to win people over, and you will try too. You'll smile politely at barons who ogle you, ask careful questions about local saints, compliment tapestries even when they're ugly. Everything is performance, and the worst part, the performance never ends. You're not allowed to sulk or snap or ask to go home, not unless you want to start a diplomatic incident. Oh, and you quickly realize that every step you take is being watched. Not metaphorically, literally. There are eyes in the walls, not magic, just very bored, very nosy servants who report to higher-ranking courtiers, who in turn feed information to the king's advisors, and eventually to the king himself. Did the queen eat her figs at breakfast? Did she talk too long with the Spanish envoy? Did she wear blue on a feast day? All noted, all discussed in hushed tones over spiced wine. But let's zoom in on the servants for a moment, because this is where things get weird. Some are devoted, some resentful, and some are just there. One might be a peasant girl who's never left her village before being promoted to chambermaid. Another could be the bastard daughter of a noble family with nowhere else to go. And a few, full-on spies. Some sent by your own family, some by your enemies, and some just nosy opportunists with good ears and long memories. The fringe fact here, in some medieval courts, queens were expected to keep their own miniature household within the larger royal household. Think of it like a secret club with its own budget, hierarchy and drama. You manage your own maids, scribes, cooks and confessor. Sounds empowering, until you realize any one of them might betray you the moment it benefits someone higher up the chain. Meanwhile, your new subjects are watching too, and they have opinions. If you're from a foreign land, you're immediately suspected of trying to corrupt the court with foreign ideas, or worse, foreign fashions. They whisper that you bring omens, that your accent means your prayers don't count, that your foreign ways are a sign of secret sin. Even if you're kind and generous, rumours cling to you like damp wool. This brings us to a long-standing scholarly debate. Were foreign queens more vulnerable or more powerful because of their outsider status? Some say they had fewer political allies and were easy scapegoats. Others argue that their unique background gave them a rare independence from local factions. In your case, it just feels like being isolated in a room full of people who all know something you don't. But still, you settle in. You memorize names. You learn which corners of the castle stay warmest at night. You start eating like the locals, sort of. You practice curtsies in front of the looking-glass until your knees ache, and slowly, very slowly, the court begins to see you, not just as the new queen, but as their queen. Not that this makes things easier. In fact, it just means the real games are about to begin. Night falls heavy in the stone corridors of your new home, and while the day has been full of handshakes, veiled compliments, and trying not to trip over your own embroidery, tonight is something else entirely. Tonight is about duty, or, depending on which court gossip you listen to, spectacle. You're expected to do more than share a bed. You're expected to seal the marriage in a way that leaves no doubt, no legal loopholes, and no "we'll wait and see." Tonight, you're expected to consummate your union, and in some medieval courts, that expectation doesn't stop at the bedroom door. You've heard the whispers, of course. Some kingdoms go all in on the witnessed bedding ceremony. A crowd escorts you and your husband to the marriage bed with jokes, songs, and awkward blessings. Think of it as a medieval conga line, except it ends with you being undressed by your ladies while everyone else stands around pretending not to stare. In some places, the bedding itself was attended, though mercifully not always literally witnessed. Instead, the next morning, sheets were displayed, or midwives and matrons might be called to check for certain, signs of activity. You lie in bed, heart pounding, draped in linens that smell like damp rosewater, and centuries of awkward history. Your husband lies beside you, possibly more nervous than you are, though he'd rather be thrown to the wolves than admit it. Whether he's gentle or cold, or fumbling or practiced, you're still a teenager, and no amount of training or advice can prepare you for the reality of being expected to perform intimacy with someone who was a stranger last week. This is not a honeymoon, it's a civic ritual, and while it's cloaked in lace and candles, it's ultimately about succession and legitimacy, not your feelings. This is what queens were trained for, even if no one said it out loud. You may have spent years learning courtly manners, religious verses, how to direct a household, but all of it leads to this, making sure the marriage is binding and productive. It's a terrifyingly thin line between beloved queen and political failure. You wake up the next morning under that same weight. You're a wife now, a potential mother, a state investment that needs to yield results. And people start watching you differently. The same courtiers who nodded politely yesterday now glance at your stomach when you pass, eyes flicking down as if your womb might announce its intentions by breakfast. Your maids whisper more, the ladies-in-waiting act more possessive, and your husband, well, he's probably off hawking or hunting, because the deed is done, and his role, at least for now, is considered fulfilled. You might not even be the only woman in his life. Medieval kings were not known for monogamy. Some had official mistresses, others just a rotating list of favourites, many of whom lived under the same roof. In some courts, the queen was expected to tolerate it. Open jealousy was not elegant. You're meant to be serene, divine, and above it all, even if your heart's breaking or your blood's boiling. And yet, some queens navigated this chaos with surprising agency. Take Isabella of France, for instance. Married to England's Edward II, who famously preferred the company of a certain male favourite, Isabella endured years of being sidelined before eventually leading a rebellion against her husband. Yep, the Queen led an actual coup. So while the first night might feel like the beginning of a lifetime of submission, that's not always how the story ends. But in this moment, that feels very far away. The court isn't done with you yet. After the marriage comes the public confirmation of your new role. You might be paraded through the streets in a gilded carriage, petals thrown at your feet, people cheering as if you've already delivered twins and saved the kingdom from plague. It's all part of the illusion. Queens aren't just figureheads. They're symbols of divine blessing. Your beauty, your poise, your fertility, all seen as signs that God favours the realm. No pressure. A fringe fact worth noting. In some traditions, a special cake or spiced bread was served the day after the wedding, and everyone would toast to your hypothetical future children. Sometimes there were even fertility symbols baked into the crust, because what's more charming than cutting into a cake and finding a little golden baby charm staring up at you? But don't be fooled. Under all this pomp lies a harsh truth. If you don't get pregnant quickly, or worse, if you miscarry, your popularity will nosedive. People will blame your body, your foreign blood, your sins, your lack of piety. Never mind that medieval medicine was basically guesswork with leeches. Never mind that men also contribute half of that equation. You are the queen, and therefore the breeding machine. The pressure is constant and deafening. There's a long-standing scholarly debate about how much say medieval queens had over their own marital beds. Some argue that queens could negotiate bedroom dynamics, especially if they were politically savvy or came from powerful families. Others believe queens were largely powerless, their consent a non-issue in legal and religious eyes. What we do know is that many queens found clever ways to control what they could: timing, influence over household staff, and eventually guidance over their children's futures. But at this stage, you're mostly along for the ride, so you do what you must. You perfect your smile. You begin keeping a private journal, perhaps, or whispering thoughts into the ears of trusted maids, though trust is always relative. You go to mass. You attend court. You send letters to your mother back home if the scribes allow it. You start planning for what comes next, not just pregnancy, but survival. And survival, you're starting to realize, means more than staying alive. It means staying useful, charming, obedient, fertile, unthreatening, but also clever, resilient, patient. You're walking a tightrope wrapped in gold thread, and every morning, as the bells toll across the grey courtyard and your reflection flickers in a polished copper mirror, you ask yourself quietly, how long can I keep this up? It starts with a flutter, just a whisper of nausea when you rise, a slight tightening in your chest when the morning porridge hits your stomach the wrong way. Your maid notices before you do, narrowing her eyes as she helps lace your gown a little looser. The word spreads faster than you'd think. The Queen is changing. Couriers exchange looks. The cook starts preparing lighter foods. A physician is summoned without you even asking. No one says the word directly, not yet, but you already know what they're hoping for. You're pregnant. Maybe. And just like that, you're not just a wife anymore. You're the womb of the realm. You've gone from ornamental to essential. The Queen's job, your job, is finally happening. And while on the surface there's joy, gifts, blessings, and ceremonial prayers, underneath it all is the sound of chairs being pulled closer to the throne. Because once you're carrying an heir, your power shifts just a little, but enough for people to start calculating how long they'll have to wait for a new king, or if you're really lucky, a queen mother. Pregnancy in medieval times is terrifying. There are no ultrasounds, no prenatal vitamins, no real understanding of germs or what a uterus actually looks like. You're not so much cared for as you are monitored, watched like a relic on the verge of cracking. The royal physicians poke and prod, feeling your pulse, measuring your belly with ribbons, muttering things in Latin while your ladies-in-waiting line up cloths soaked in lavender and rosemary. Some of the herbs help, some probably don't, some, if the dose is wrong, might even kill you. And yet, you go through the motions, trying to appear serene. You attend Mass every morning, nodding piously while the priest talks about the Virgin Mary and the miracle of life. That's the image they want from you. Holy Mother, chosen vessel, serene goddess of impending motherhood. But inside, you're a 17-year-old girl with lower back pain, a constant headache, and zero control over what's happening to your body. Every kick from inside your belly is both thrilling and terrifying. If it's a boy, you win the game. If it's a girl, you smile politely and pretend everyone's not secretly disappointed. And if the child is stillborn or you die in labour, well, then you'll be remembered in ballads as a tragic heroine, which is cold comfort, to be honest. By your 7th month, the palace begins to quiet down. Your husband grows more cautious. Visitors are shushed. Loud noises are forbidden near your chambers. The court is holding its collective breath. Midwives are brought in from far and wide, some traditional, some trained by monks, all quietly panicking beneath their calm smiles, because childbirth in the Middle Ages is a gamble with weighted dice. Even queens die screaming in childbed, probably especially queens. The pressure is higher, the gossip sharper, the risks enormous. And when the labour finally begins, the world shrinks. You're taken to a darkened room, windows covered, icons of saints propped up all around you. Candles flicker along the walls, shadows dancing like anxious angels. The room becomes what they call a lying-in chamber, sealed against bad spirits. It's hot, crowded, and thick with the smell of burning herbs and fear. You scream, of course you do. There's no pain relief, just grit and groan and chant and pray. The women around you, your ladies, the midwives, maybe even a few noble women, offer comfort, or at least try to. Some hold your hands, one might whisper a prayer in your ear over and over like a lullaby. But you're alone in this, really. Completely, utterly alone in your pain. Hours pass, maybe days. You lose track. The world becomes a blur of heat and agony and tightening pressure. You scream until your voice breaks. You pass out and come to. You think you hear someone say, "It's crowning," but it could just as easily be the last prayer you'll ever hear. And then, if you're lucky, a cry, a new voice, raw and angry, slicing through the candle smoke. A midwife lifts the child high, announces the sex with trembling reverence. "A boy," she says, or maybe a girl. And the court outside erupts accordingly. You don't even see the baby at first. Oh, you're too exhausted, too bloody, too shattered to sit up. Then someone presses the infant into your arms eventually, and for a second, a fleeting, golden, hallowed second, you feel joy. Pure, unfiltered joy. It's yours. This tiny, squirming person is yours. And then you remember, he doesn't really belong to you. He belongs to the kingdom. If it's a son, he's the heir, and your value skyrockets overnight. You're no longer just the queen, you're the mother of the future, a living insurance policy against succession wars. Your rooms fill with gifts, your name is sung in churches, and suddenly everyone wants your opinion on nursery arrangements, on treaties, on what colour robe the baby should wear for his first court appearance. If it's a girl, the congratulations are still there, but lighter, softer. A courtier might mention how daughters make wonderful bargaining chips for future marriages. Another might remind you that queens bear many children, and there's always next time. The fringe truth. Sometimes, if the queen gave birth to a boy, coins were minted within hours. Tiny, hastily stamped medallions that said, "This realm has an heir. All is well." If you gave birth to a girl, well, no coins. Maybe a feast if you were lucky. And here comes the scholarly debate. Did childbirth increase a queen's political power or trap her further? Some argue that motherhood granted queens influence, control over the royal nursery, a seat at the regency table if the king died. Others point out that it made queens more vulnerable, exposed to dangerous childbirths over and over again, reduced to walking cradles whose usefulness hinged on the health of their offspring. The answer, as always, depends on who you were, where you ruled, and how lucky your body was. You're bundled up in clean linen now, propped on pillows, your skin still pale and waxy, but the baby is breathing. You're breathing. The bells are ringing across the city, the kingdom rejoices. And you close your eyes and try to forget that this is only the first round. You've survived childbirth. That alone makes you something of a miracle. Now, as the days blend into a haze of damp linen, soft lullabies and sharp pelvic pain, you begin to settle into your new role. Not just as queen, not just as wife, but as something far more exhausting. Royal Mother. And with that title comes another shift, one that has less to do with survival and more to do with presentation. You can barely sit upright, but already the court expects you to begin looking the part again. And looking the part, as it turns out, is a full-time job. Your wardrobe becomes a stage, and every layer you put on is political. Every colour, every hem, every jewel carries a message. I am regal. I am fertile. I am strong. But more than anything else, it screams, I am worth obeying. You're no longer dressing to impress a husband. You're dressing to remind the kingdom that you belong here. That you have produced proof of your power in the form of a living, breathing heir. You're not to be dismissed, ignored, or replaced. Not yet, anyway. In the royal wardrobe, there's no such thing as casual. There's only layers: chemise, surcoat, gown, overgown, cloak, silk, velvet, fur, embroidery so fine it looks like lace, stitched with real gold thread, jewels sewn directly into sleeves. You don't wear your wealth. You drag it behind you, sewn into the hem and clinging to your wrists. Your crown alone could buy a small town and still have change, left over for a cathedral bell. And yet, underneath it all, you itch. The brocade is stiff. The pearls rub your collarbone raw. Some of the fur lining smells like damp cellar, especially in winter when nothing dries properly. You long for soft linen shifts, for bare feet on warm stones, for a moment without corsetry and pins. But queens don't get comfort. They get presents. Now, here's the tricky bit. You don't actually choose your wardrobe. Not entirely. A royal tailor does that, so does your chamberlain. And sometimes, just for fun, your mother-in-law weighs in. Your body is essentially on loan to the crown, and so is the fabric that wraps it. If a foreign ambassador visits, they'll expect you to wear a particular colour, perhaps blue to signify purity, or red to evoke power. If it's Easter, your garments will be stitched with lilies and crosses. If it's Advent, out comes the dark velvet and silver thread. Every season is a costume change. Historical tidbit: Queen Isabella of Castile's wardrobe accounts were meticulously kept, detailing every gown, every fur trim, every jewel. These records show how deeply intertwined royal fashion was with political messaging and national identity. So, as you stand there, weighted down by layers of silk and expectation, you understand that your appearance is a language in itself. It speaks of power, of tradition, of the continuation of a dynasty. And you, the young woman underneath it all, are merely the messenger. What do you think was the most challenging aspect of being a medieval queen?